Welcome to Growing Up Skywalker. I'm Sam.
Hi, I'm Anna.
And today we're talking to you about the second half of the Clone Wars movie.
Woohoo!
So for those of you who missed the first half of the movie or want to recap because there's a lot going on.
Oh my God, so much going on.
The general plot is that the Separatists or someone has kidnapped Jabba the Hutt's baby.
His larva baby.
Mm-hmm, and we learned that Jabba the Hutt has a gender and that gender is male.
Tragically.
Kind of.
Tragically, we learn a lot more than we wanted to know about the Huttese and their larva babies.
I mean, they're kind of cute. But anyway, she's giving me a look, folks. Anyway, of course, Anakin and Obi-Wan are called in to save the day after we resolve the Battle of Christophsis, which is where Ahsoka Tano is assigned to Anakin Skywalker as a Padawan. So they resolve the Battle of Christophsis, solve all the problems, then they need to go rescue Jabba the Hutt's baby from the planet of Teth. At the Battle of Teth, they end up at this cool monastery, and it is, of course, surrounded by Separatist battle droids. They fight their way in. They rescue the baby, but then the baby turns out to have been sick, poisoned, whatever. Doesn't really matter. And we left off last session with Anakin leaving the monastery on dragonflies to get to a real sketchy ship that has some Separatist droids on it. So this starts off and Obi-Wan has shown up to save the day.
And fight Asajj Ventress.
Mm-hmm. Who has been real scary up until now. She handily defeated Ahsoka right before they jumped on the dragonflies. So Obi-Wan tells R4 to take the wheel, and then he airdrops himself into battle, rescuing Rex and the rest of the clones in a pretty stunning fight, but somehow the droids just keep coming, and they're trying to figure out where Skywalker is, what they can do. Meanwhile, Skywalker and Ahsoka have gotten aboard this claptrap of a funky ship and are flying up to space. They get to the Jedi cruiser, which fires on them because they have no IFF or anything. And they're like, hey, stop shooting at us. And they make contact. Anakin tells them to open a door so they can get in. There's a continual note of conflict between Anakin, like as soon as he gets in the ship, he's like, oh yeah, let's go blast those droids. And Ahsoka's like, we have a mission still.
Yeah, Ahsoka really keeps him on track in this part of the movie. She's like, we have a mission. It's to get this Huttlet to Tatooine alive. And nothing comes before the mission.
Yeah. And in fact, that's what Rex says as they're flying off. That, yeah, I understand that you're leaving me here to die. Nothing comes before the mission. So
he's a good sport about it.
He is.
And he doesn't die.
And he doesn't die. Rex survives a long time. But anyway, they are flying up in their claptrap of a ship. They get shot at a little bit. They pick up some vulture droids on their tail. They do some really fancy
really
flying.
Cool flying.
This is the animation budget and like effort that goes into it is particularly noticeable in this scene and some of the lightsaber scenes. So they head towards the bay door, which the vulture droids swoop ahead and blow up, killing lots of clones.
And they've got no choice but to just turn back and head straight to Tatooine in their crappy ship.
As this is going on, Obi-Wan is fighting Ventress.
Oh, it's so great. As soon as Anakin, Ahsoka, and R2 manage to get their ship into hyperdrive, Obi-Wan looks at Asajj and says, yes, I feel it too. Anakin is gone. You failed. And then they continue to fight in probably either the coolest or the second coolest lightsaber duel of this movie.
It's definitely up there. There's another one later that is also extremely cool. The fights in this are similar to the space battles. Higher effort was put into them than in the TV series. And these are some good fights.
Obi-Wan disarms Asajj just like as cool as a cucumber.
Yeah, so Obi-Wan shows up and he's ready to fight Asajj, and he's like, yes, we meet again. And these two B2 battle droids, which are really scary, show up. He goes into his Soriesu form and just deflects their shots until he's close enough to chop them into pieces and then chases after her.
Oh, it's so great.
Then while they're fighting, she flings her cloak off into his face, and he
I was a little bummed about it because Asajj's original outfit is way cooler with her like cloak skirt thing going on.
Yeah.
And then as soon as she whips it off and throws it at Obi-Wan, we'll have to talk about this later, but the costuming between the genders is really inequitable in this movie. And so all of a sudden you've got like boobs and back all over the place. And Asajj just has no armor on and is going after Obi-Wan with double lightsabers.
Not that it really helps with a lightsaber wearing armor much. Asajj shows off her really cool lightsaber. She's got 2 curved lightsabers similar to Dooku's lightsaber, and she connects them together to make a double lightsaber similar to Maul. But sometime during this fight, Obi-Wan cuts it in half. So they're fighting. They know Anakin is left. They're on this bridge, presumably over a bottomless drop. Ventress taps her wrist communicator, and Obi-Wan shoves one of her lightsabers off the cliff. Her wrist communicator goes off as a vulture droid flies by, which Asajj pretty coolly jumps on top of and
scoots away.
Obi-Wan goes and cleans everything up. Meanwhile,
Ahsoka, Anakin, and R2 are flying to Tatooine, which Ahsoka notes, oh, going to Tatooine is like going home, right? And Anakin has some like intrusive PTSD thoughts about probably murdering a whole clan of Tusken Raiders the last time he was on Tatooine. Awkward.
There's actually a moment there. It's a scene cut, a screen wipe, and you hear the characteristic cry of the Tusken Raiders, and he's like PTSDing.
Ooh, that was really well done.
Mm-hmm. As that happens, we cut to Dooku, who's in front of Jabba, and he gets a message from Ventress, and Ventress says, they've killed the Huttese. They're coming to you to kill you. And of course, Dooku plays this in front of Jabba and says, yes, well, I will take care of it from here. In the meantime, Ahsoka goes into the back and has a funny moment with a silly
medical droid.
Yeah, like a hologram of a medical droid. This takes place about 13 years after Star Trek Voyager, which had a holographic doctor who was actually competent. This holodoctor was not competent. He's like mumbling and like, oh yes, just give him one of these pills and get a real doctor, and then bounces.
But it does what it needs to do. The medical booster fixes up the Huttese. He's fine.
Yes.
He goes back to his normal shade of puke green.
After letting out a visibly green burp.
God, Hutts are just so gross.
So they arrive at Tatooine and are beset by P-38 fighters with IG-100 MagnaGuards in them, which are the guys who have the cool shock sticks. And it is a tough fight. There's a little bit of a bonding moment right before that, right? Like as we're going into this scene of Anakin asking Ahsoka for help and repairing the ship. And I think that's really cool. They're like bonding as a Padawan and Master because that's Anakin's jam.
There's like a little lesson moment too where Ahsoka says, Master, today I did my best to stay cool and calm and collected, and everything was so easy when I was able to do that. And it was a really sweet moment of Ahsoka like reaching out to her Jedi Master and being like, I'm doing my best and I feel like I did really good today. And then bam, they're in the middle of a space battle.
Which Anakin was giving his lesson, which is, who needs shields when you have guns? Meanwhile, they're surrounded by fighters. And she's like, I bet you wish you had shields now. And he's like, shut up.
Oh my God. The Ahsoka-Anakin dynamic is so much spicier than I remembered.
Yeah, it's
Ahsoka's
good.
yelling at him.
And she's, they've been friends for like
2 minutes.
Yeah, like 2 days maybe, depending on how long it takes to fly from Christophsis to Teth.
A day and a half max.
So they're getting shot at by these things. They fly around pretty wildly. There's like a scene where Ahsoka and the Huttese and R2 are like bouncing around the back of the ship as Anakin's like, hold on. He gets a kill. And
R2 gets a kill.
Yes. And then he tells R2 to get the guns. And then R2 rotates the gun and Anakin's like, hey, good job, little buddy. You've been holding out on me. And Anakin's flying over Tatooine. R2 has shot down the second P-38 and their ship is falling apart. They get a phone call from Obi-Wan who says, Anakin, did you get shot down again?
And Ahsoka's like, yes.
And he's like, I haven't had time to fix the ship yet.
Oh God, it's so good.
So they crash on Tatooine.
It's a pretty slick crash landing by all accounts. They're in one piece.
So at this point, Obi-Wan is like, well, this situation's gotten a little funky. So he calls in to Yoda and the Chancellor, who are having a meeting, of course, at this time. And they're like, yes, well, we'll try to resolve this situation as best as we can. Just kind of an update. Meanwhile, Padme just walks into the Chancellor's office.
I cannot believe that in the last 15 to 18 minutes of this feature-length film, they just throw an entire Padme subplot in here. Mm-hmm. And yet they do. The plot of this movie is so messy.
So Padme shows up and Chancellor Palpatine is like, yes, the Outer Rim, yada, yada. Anyway, this Anakin guy, you may have met him, whatever. He's in trouble. And she's like, oh, well, I know a Hutt. I can take care of this. He's like, I sure wish you wouldn't do that. And she's like, well, I'll be safe. And he's like, you're doing this against my advice. He's just
really half-heartedly trying to be like, no, don't do that.
Yeah. So Padme goes and meets
Zero the Hutt.
Zero the Hutt.
Can I please state for the record, Zero the Hutt is an affront to every gay Southerner everywhere. That accent is the most atrocious thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
I looked up when Lindsey Graham became a senator, and it was 5 years before this movie. So I feel like there might be a bit of shout out there because it is that extremely ridiculous accent. And of course, he speaks in Galactic Basic as opposed to Huttese. But we cut to him, and he's having one of his droids who's failed him for the first time. At last, Kronos 327, you've failed me.
Oh my God, the accent is so good.
And he takes him away. Take him away for parts. And he's smoking out of a hookah, and he's got this cool, glow-in-the-dark tattoo over his eye.
It is absolutely incredible. I just want to say that the downtown sexy urban Coruscant bar scene that we get, especially in Attack of the Clones, but also in this movie, I just want nothing more than to hang out in downtown Coruscant at these, amazing bars with jazz quartets.
It's a world-spanning city.
It is such a mood. City. I'm deeply into this.
After the droid is hauled off for parts, the music cuts to upbeat, and right then Padme shows up and tries to broker a deal between the Republic and the Hutts. Mm-hmm. Zero is not having any of that, kicks her out. Padme, on her way out, decides to kick the robot and sneak out through the door of the elevator just in time and sneak in on Zero and Dooku having a conversation, where apparently Zero has been part of this whole thing because that way he is going to be in charge of the Hutt clans as opposed to Jabba.
Yes, he wants Jabba to get tried by the Jedi Council and essentially taken out of action so that Zero can become the leader of all the Hutt clans.
Or they just point Anakin at it and there'll be no trial whatsoever.
Okay. In tune with the messiness of this plot, we then splice back to Tatooine, where we kind of get the fortune cookie of the movie. Ahsoka and Anakin and R2 are making their way across the Dune Sea. The Dune Sea. And Ahsoka is clearly trying to fish for information about Anakin's past. And she says, Master Yoda told me one time that old sins cast long shadows. Does this relate to you at all, Master?
And Anakin says...
Anakin is very clearly haunted by his past in this scene, and he says, it means your past can ruin your future if you allow it. And then it was Master Skywalker who said, and I don't want to fucking talk about it.
Yeah. So, yeah, he's still got that Tusken scream in the back of his head. And it's interesting. I'm pretty sure this would be the first time he's back to Tatooine since then.
I imagine so.
And it does relate to throughout the rest of Anakin's life why he didn't think about Tatooine as much as he could.
Yeah, he tells Ahsoka, I had hoped to never see this dust bucket ever again. Which is it speaks to Anakin trying to escape from his past. But when there is trauma in your past, it will keep coming back to haunt you until you deal with it. That's the hero's journey. So Padme's being held in Zero's dungeon. She manages to trick the droids that are guarding her into opening up her communicator.
Well, she receives a phone call and she's like, no, don't answer my phone. And they're like, what is it? And there's C-3PO.
C-3PO.
And he's like, oh no, what's happened? And she's like, I'm being held by Zero the Hutt. Call for help.
Bye.
And they smash it. And so she's pulled in front of Zero.
Mm-hmm.
And Zero the Hutt says, you've tried to escape. You're too dangerous to be left alive. They call Count Dooku. Count Dooku pulls a Tracy Morgan on her and is like, I have no idea. Nice to meet you, Senator Amidala. And then he tells Zero that she's worth a lot, so to keep her alive, because Newt Gunray still wants her alive because she's been a thorn in his side forever.
Freaking Newt Gunray.
I know.
Someone get him out of my hair. Someone get him out of Padme's hair. Meanwhile.
Oh
my gosh. This plot is so messy.
So
Dooku manages to send some, or...
No, so first, Anakin says we feel the dark side coming and we need to split ways.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's been carrying Stinky in his backpack this whole time.
It's really cute, actually.
Yes. And so then Dooku shows up and Anakin's got the backpack and they have a fight in the sand.
Yeah, Dooku first shoots like blue force lightning at Anakin, and Anakin zaps it up through his lightsaber. And I remembered immediately the last time Anakin saw Dooku sliced his hand off.
Also force lightninged him real bad.
Yeah.
So he's like, good, you leveled up. Good job.
Yeah, they're battling, and Dooku says, your training has come a long way, boy. And I'm like, ooh, yeah, rah.
Dooku has good one-liners.
He really does. He also is trying to unsettle Anakin by saying, I remember, this is your home planet, isn't it? I sense your strong feelings, pain, loss. He's really trying to get into Anakin's head.
Mm-hmm. So they have a fight. Anakin does a very cool move where he flings a bunch of sand at him.
Yeah, he like Avatar The Last Airbender's Dooku with some sand bending.
But Dooku does it right back. In an interesting callback to the previous fight between Obi-Wan and Ventress, at that point, Ventress whips away Obi-Wan's lightsaber, and then she stabs at Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan dodges.
Mm-hmm.
When Dooku sandwiches, pun not intended. When Dooku flings Anakin's lightsaber away with the sand, Anakin lies there and pulls his lightsaber to him and does a really difficult defense against Dooku, because that's how Anakin rolls. He would never think about ducking or retreating. He always is on the attack.
Dooku then slashes Anakin's backpack,
which is full of rocks. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, so Dooku says, well, it's all over now. I killed the Huttlet. And Anakin is like, haha, joke's on you. My backpack was full of rocks, which is such bullshit. Like, Dooku would be able to sense if there was a living being inside of that backpack or not.
Unless Anakin was hiding his feelings by having strong emotions of loss and etc.
Oh, okay. That is very interesting. That deserves some thought.
But then Dooku brings up a holophone and says, but your Padawan is not super good, and I've already got her caught in my net, which is made of MagnaGuards, and we cut to MagnaGuards beating up Ahsoka.
No, first we have the best line in this entire movie, which is that Anakin looks at Dooku and says, she's more skillful than you think. Ooh, it's so good! And then we cut to my babies in battle.
Yeah, Ahsoka says 3 against 1, watch my back, Stinky.
So what is she fighting exactly?
So those are IG-100 MagnaGuards, and we see them in episode 3. They're Grievous and Dooku's personal guard droids, and they have cool, like, shock lances.
Yeah, they're really scary.
Mm-hmm.
Ahsoka basically firms up her upper lip, or what's that saying? She, like...
stiffens her upper lip.
She stiffens her upper lip and is like, okay, I am the Padawan in this situation, but I'm gonna murder these 3 droids.
She's got R2 to help. He goes up, he gives him a little shock, and the droid boots him off the hillside, and R2 is in a position he cannot get himself out of despite having rocket boots, because he's like on his back, and presumably he used all his rocket fuel on that half-mile flight to the ship.
My baby.
So poor R2's sitting there. Ahsoka gets knocked off the hillside as well.
Okay, and then we cut again back to Coruscant with Padme being marched in front of Zero, and then C-3PO peeks around the corner, is like, hello.
Well, first of all, a bunch of busted droids blow up out of the corner as like someone breaches and clears the room, and then C-3PO shows up. I imagine Zero at that moment was like, who sent a death protocol droid at me? Because the protocol droid shows up. But then Captain Fox of the Coruscant Guard shows up and they shoot everyone.
The second best line in this movie, Zero says, "Run for it," and then slithers away at like 1.5 miles per hour.
Not a good speed.
It's really so great.
About the speed you'd expect a Hutt to have.
We both laughed out loud. It was, it was quality.
Back on Tatooine, having watched this movie of Ahsoka get beat up by MagnaGuards, Anakin is like, okay, well, I'll smell you later. You left your keys in your ignition, and jumps on Dooku's bike and speeds off to the Jabba's palace.
Yeah, he completely flies over Ahsoka, who's in battle with the 2 remaining droids. And Ahsoka's like, ugh, he never listens, which is such a mood. Anakin is a himbo in this movie.
So Anakin shows up and is like, I'm here to see my Padawan. The protocol droid is like, yes, right this way. May I have your lightsaber, please? He's like, whatever, fine. He walks in and Jabba's ready to kill him.
And then Ahsoka finishes off the remaining droid, says, wow, being a Padawan is harder than I thought. Oh, my honey. And then marches into Jabba's palace and saves the day.
Because at that point, Anakin has his lightsaber up against Jabba's throat and is like, there's a miscommunication here. Although, as I watch this for another time, Anakin definitely knows Huttese. It would be interesting to have that back and forth.
Oh, you're right.
But because it's a younger kid's movie, you don't want to do the subtitles and everything. So
yeah, no one should ever send Anakin on a diplomatic mission ever. He's trying to smooth things over with Jabba and ends up holding him at saber point.
So you think the day is saved because the Jedi show up with the baby. Jabba's very happy to see the baby and says, "You
are now to be executed immediately."
And
then it turns out Padme also contributes to saving the day because she holocrons in with Zero, who admits to being part of this entire plot to overthrow Jabba. Jabba is basically like, you're poodoo.
And, kind of gives him the, what do you mean you were threatened by Count Dooku? You're a mafia lord. Like, get it together.
So then Padme kind of like elbows him off the screen, comes back in, arranges the treaty with Jabba. And now the Republic can move their clone armies through Jabba's space.
After a really, as just not even veiled moment of eye banging between
literally,
Anakin and
how
Padme.
can you not know Padme and Anakin are banging?
Yeah.
How can you not know?
You have my undying gratitude.
Oh my God, it's really so great.
It's awkward.
But yeah, this is like all in a day's work for Padme. She seals the treaty and kind of saves the day.
She was very much action Padme.
Action Padme. Hard eyes.
So that's the plot of the movie. We get to the end and Yoda and Obi-Wan show up in a landing craft, and then you have an awkward moment where everyone smiles and waves, and then you zoom out on the baby.
Yeah, there's a really weird ending. Like the score plays in the background. Palpatine and Dooku are kind of debriefing. Palpatine says, "Allow the Jedi their small victory. The engines of this war turn in our favor." Ba-ba-bum. And then you close in on the steps of Jabba's palace. Anakin and Ahsoka are backlit. They're presented kind of like as a team of equals, sort of for the first time.
For some reason.
Yeah, and then it looks like Yoda kind of gives a nod of approval to Ahsoka and Anakin, and then the credits roll.
Yeah, it's interesting that Palpatine moment at the end, because this is the type of thing which Palpatine, running the war from both sides, might have been able to. He would have been able to capitalize on either way. And I think that his main plan is actually to put Anakin in precarious situations.
Oh, interesting.
And part of it is circling back to the first half of this movie when we talk about Yoda saying Anakin's going to have to learn to let go of his Padawan. He's going to have to learn to let go of something. By putting him in this position and by bringing Padme into this, then Anakin is learning that he has success when he hangs on to things instead of lets go of things, which is not the Jedi way.
He is not learning the lesson.
He is learning the lesson Palpatine wants him to.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm. And you also mentioned the score. The score of this movie is very good.
The score of this movie is the best that I have experienced in any Star Wars feature film so far. Just the way that it sets the mood, like every time you're on Tatooine or when you're approaching like a new and exotic location, it really sets this like cool Middle Eastern vibe.
Mm-hmm.
The jazz quartet on Coruscant is so utterly ridiculously good. Even the final score in the end scene on Tatooine, is it the Star Wars theme that's playing kind of slow and soft, or is it the Tatooine theme?
I think it's the Star Wars theme, but either way, there's really good music on here. So what are some of the things you want to talk about in this movie?
Okay, well, you know me. I am begging you to please let me talk about gender in this movie.
As we were watching this one for a recap, you did mention the Bechdel test in the only conversation between two women in this movie, which is Ventress and Ahsoka.
Yes. Okay. I'm a little embarrassed. I pronounced it Bechdel test for most of my life. And last week I found out it's pronounced Bechdel test. So I'm mortified. But the Bechdel test is a really simple test for film and movies and media. Are there more than two women in the movie, and do they have a conversation about someone or something other than a man? This movie has 3 main female characters, but it doesn't pass the Bechdel test because the only conversation between 2 women is between Asajj and Ahsoka as they're fighting outside of the monastery. And Asajj says, "Where's Skywalker?"
Mm-hmm.
Ahsoka doesn't say anything back. And so the only conversation between 2 women in this movie was about a man. So technically this movie doesn't pass the Bechdel test. But there's a lot of other extraordinarily good and interesting things about gender happening in this movie that I think is redeeming.
Every single woman in here is in action mode in a good way.
Ahsoka, every single woman in this movie is advancing the plot.
Yes, very much. I mean, you needed Ahsoka and Padme to save the day, and Ventress is threatening.
And she's carrying out the will of Dooku and Palpatine. She's the player on the field making this plot actually come to fruition for the Sith.
Mm-hmm.
So there's really amazing, cool representation of women in this movie. One of the things that I picked up on that I really loved is when you're seeing female characters in battle in this movie, their physiology is very different from that of their male counterparts. And it leads to really interesting fight scenes. So when Obi-Wan and Ventress are fighting their lightsaber battle, the animators have gone to great length to show Ventress's hip flexor flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
So she is able to land in different crouches and fighting positions that they contrast really sharply with Obi-Wan's posture, where his knees are closer together, because a lot of men have tighter hip flexors.
Mm-hmm.
And their battle becomes that much more dynamic and interesting to watch because of their different physiology, which I think is so cool.
I think that's a little charitable because the dark side of that is that she is, as you mentioned, rather scantily garbed, and she's just in these evocative positions. You know, she's really splayed out. So.
That's true.
But that's also Ventress's character. That's part of being a Sith, is that your presence, your passion, your life is all, you want to be having these distractions in battle. You want to be overwhelming your opponent. And so,
So you're saying that Ventress is weaponizing her sexiness?
Yeah, I feel like it kind of works on Obi-Wan.
It does. They have when...
It's real toxic chemistry.
Seriously, when Obi-Wan looks at her and says, "You'll have to do better than that, my darling." Woo! Hot damn.
You're just thinking of Kenobi saying that to you.
Hot damn. Yes, please. Anyway, that is one of the really redeeming things about gender in this movie. On the flip side, it was really frustrating to see the costuming differences. Our 3 main characters that are female have exposed backs, boobs, stomachs, and shoulders the whole movie.
Yeah.
Whereas Obi-Wan and Anakin get to wear armor.
Yeah. Yeah.
But their female counterparts are rushing into battle just with bare skin everywhere.
Yeah, that is an interesting thing. I wouldn't imagine you'd necessarily want to throw a Padawan in armor into battle because they're smaller, because they're still younger, and it's kind of a strength thing, which might be not the style which Ahsoka fights in, because she actually fights in a different style, and this is much more true as the Clone Wars progress, because eventually she picks up a second lightsaber. Her fighting style changes significantly because she's Togruta, and hard to say whether she runs hot or whatever, but I feel like telling a Jedi what to wear in battle, they don't have a uniform. You choose what works best for you.
Yeah, that's true. So I guess we should assume that Ahsoka's going to pick something to wear that works for what she's doing.
And then on the flip side, that when Padme shows up in a white jumpsuit, that someone's ass is going to get pounded in.
Oh my God.
That is action Padme mode.
Action Padme was back in her white jumpsuit.
We want to give a quick shout out to Anchor.fm. Anchor.fm is a product of Spotify, and they provide podcast hosting and delivery to all the apps, everything. And for new podcasters like us, it is an absolute lifesaver.
This is really nice because I'm a Spotify person and Sam is not. So we get to listen to our podcast on the platforms that we prefer. And so do you.
And they provide podcasts on platforms we didn't even know about,
which is so exciting.
Yes. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Thanks, Anchor.
Thanks, Anchor.
So I had a lot of thoughts about gender in this movie. I think that really does sum it up. If I had anything else to say, first of all, Dave Filoni directed this movie, and I'm coming to the conclusion that good female representation happens when Dave Filoni is in the picture. And also, I think even though it has some flaws, this movie shows a lot of different ways to be a woman. And that is more than I had thought to hope for out of an animated cartoon.
I totally agree. I really appreciate the Padme bits, because the Padme stuff that comes in is she always does her thing. Like when she's in the Chancellor's office and she says, "Oh, I can get that treaty signed using diplomacy." I think that's very cool. I think that the dichotomy between Asajj and Ahsoka is also interesting, because although Asajj can handily beat Ahsoka with a lightsaber, Ahsoka is generally useful for the plot and everything. This whole movie, she's helping Anakin see what he needs to be doing. And it's a real moment of guidance that, as we talked about in last episode, Yoda might be aiming towards. However, given that during this half of the movie, Obi-Wan calls the office and he sees Yoda and Palpatine having a conversation, and that's what he calls into. I wonder if Palpatine might have orchestrated the whole thing to have Ahsoka be Anakin's Padawan.
Oh, I never even thought about that.
Because it seems like he's got his fingers everywhere. On the flip side of that, this is also beyond action Padme. This is also action Obi-Wan.
It really is.
Don't see him as much in even other Clone Wars episodes, just demolishing droids.
Seriously, he's graceful, he's assertive, he's confident, he's extremely handsome in this movie. The animation for Ewan McGregor is so good.
He's also more aggressive.
Yes.
But he's still supportive in the flying scenes. He's flying along and he's got a wingman, Oddball, and he has Oddball panics and he's hold it together, Oddball. This is all fine. Everything's, that's just war. He does that twice.
Where Oddball is apologizing to Obi-Wan for not keeping his shit together. Yeah,
and Obi-Wan's it happens, dude. It's fine. You get to live.
We talked in the last episode about how this movie shows Obi-Wan in a more serious light.
Very much so.
Yeah, I saw that, although I thought that the fight with Ventress showed a much lighter side, and it was really fun to see Obi-Wan in action, but also having fun, even in this grave situation that he found himself in.
That fight with Ventress in the temple was really evocative of the fights between Darth Vader and Luke in episodes 5 and 6.
Oh, okay. Tell me more about that.
Because there's one in episode 6, Return of the Jedi, where Darth Vader says, "Your feelings betray you." And Luke is hiding. And presumably a Jedi can do interesting things with the Force to hide more effectively. We see that later, particularly in The Mandalorian, when we see Ahsoka. But that, like, the ability to hide in plain sight is something that some Jedi appear to be able to do. And that is what Obi-Wan is saying, that he walks in this temple and presumably Asajj is like, "I'm going to, leap up behind you and get you." And Obi-Wan's like, "I know you're in here. I can feel you. Your feelings betray you."
Yeah, I loved seeing both the light side and the dark side use that trick in this movie, because Obi-Wan uses it on Asajj and then Dooku uses it on Anakin.
Yeah.
It's nice to see that. It's nice to see that advantage used both ways.
And it goes to show what you were talking about earlier when Ahsoka said, "I tried to trust in my feelings and things went okay. Things went better for her."
She trusted in her training.
Yeah.
And it worked out for her. So she's being trained well.
Yes, up to this point.
Exactly.
And now she's being trained to be a warrior by the foremost warrior, because that's the other thing, that although we see Obi-Wan in an extreme war footing in this movie, we also see Anakin being premium Anakin. Like, he's stern, but he does look out for his men and his Padawan.
He's genuinely sorry that he can't stay and help Rex and Rex's clones.
And Rex seems genuinely sad to see him go. He understands, but Rex is like, "Oh, crap, this is no good."
You think so? I thought Rex just really took it on the chin and was like, "That's all right, General. We're going to keep doing what we need to do."
I mean, it's hard to tell because you don't ever see a clone without their helmet in this episode, or in this movie, I don't believe. But, from the voice, I got a different read of it, that Rex did feel a little hung out to dry, but understood. And I think that's part of the relationship between Rex and Anakin, because Rex is Anakin's second in command and they do crazy stuff together. And that's like Anakin's stock and trade. And being Anakin's clone commander is a real crazy honor. And I imagine that part of Rex's long-term survival is because Anakin does look out for his men, but also he has all these crazy plans and Rex gets to do them.
It's high risk, high reward for sure, being on Anakin's coattails.
Very much. Whereas, Cody is sitting there up at the ship, commanding things and yes, this is fine. I don't need to be part of every assault. So that's an interesting difference between them. I remarked earlier on the lightsaber differences between them. This is some real good lightsaber duels for the entire Clone Wars show and movie. I like to incorporate them together in concept because it's the same animation style, same characters, same time period. Although it shares an animation style with Rebels and Bad Batch, it's different enough. And these are some real top tier lightsaber battles. Aren't really matched until season 7. And this is the good stuff.
They're fast, they're fluid, they're exciting, they're dynamic.
They do have a few too many cuts and the zoom-ins are not quite there, but the coverage, the subject matter, watching these fights really gives you the sense of this is pure Star Wars. I think the first time I saw this, when they were first assaulting Teth, climbing up those landers and then watching these Jedi do crazy stuff, I'm like, this is the reason the Clone Wars exists.
That's really interesting because I was just thinking that the big battle scenes for me as a newbie Star Wars fan, as someone who's not really a big fan of war movies, the big battle scenes really caused me to zone out and lose interest, but the one-on-one or the two-on-one lightsaber battles really zoom me back into focus and give me a more nuanced understanding of the dynamics at play. But the walkers walking up the cliffside to the monastery on Teth, I don't know. It wasn't really my thing. It wasn't as personal.
How did you feel about Rex's several last stands after he unprisoners himself and they're in the courtyard again? He spends the whole movie in this dang courtyard and he's surrounded. He's got a few men left and they climb aboard. He jumps out of cover. He slides underneath a spider droid. He attaches a grenade to it, dives out of the way, and then he uses that for cover. They shoot up a vulture droid. They're using that for cover, and then they stand on top of it. The droids say, "You're surrounded." And Rex says, "But we've got you outnumbered."
And they go, 1, 2, 3, ah!
And then Obi-Wan shows up and finishes the job with a big strafing run.
That was a lot cooler on my third rewatch. On my first and second rewatches, I was like, okay, get me back to the main characters, whatever.
I think that is the flaw of the Clone Wars movie. And so keep in mind that this is the first animated thing that came out. And so this is the precursor for Clone Wars, Bad Batch, Rebels, Resistance, all of that.
Opening up this entire new epoch of Star Wars media.
Yes. And the space that it leaves the viewer is significantly lower than would be in anything that was filmed.
What do you mean?
Just that the scene cuts are very quick.
Oh God.
And it makes it, if you were to watch it yourself, listener, I think you would enjoy it. I think you'd have a lot of fun with it. If you sat down and watched it end to end, trying to recap it, this was actually more difficult than anything we've done so far.
I was even just exhausted by the time I finished my watch through, both times that I watched the movie all the way through.
Watching it for detail.
Watching it for detail, watching it for the plot to be moving forward, watching it for character dynamics and character development. It was exhausting to keep up with this. So what I decided is that if I had seen this movie in theaters, I was not primed to enjoy it.
Interesting.
Now that we're doing this entire watch through, I have knowledge of some of the history, some of the preceding events, some of the events that are yet to happen. I'm in the perfect place to appreciate this movie on its own terms, which I can. I can appreciate the animation, the pacing, the characters, the scoring, the development. But in any other less favorable set of circumstances, I would not be able to enjoy this movie.
That's an interesting take. Now, that said, we've talked in our previous episodes about the viewing order of the Clone Wars. And so every time I watch it, back when it was on Netflix, now that's on Disney Plus, I just turn it on, and it starts season 1, episode 1. It's not going to have this playlist that we're following. If you were to do such a thing, or if you were to recommend it, or if you were to come up with a viewing order, where would you include the movie so far? And if so, or would you include the movie?
Gosh, what a good question. I think I would say watch the movie first. Because I'm a firm believer that if you love something less, get it out of the way before you have anything to color your viewpoint.
And you don't think that would turn a viewer off?
Well, I would force them to then continue into the TV series. They would have very little say in what was happening to them in this context.
Give them the Ludovenko technique. You hold their eyes open. You're like, you're watching this.
Yeah, I would do a little Jedi mind trick. You are watching all of these now. Yeah, that's how I would do it. It's kind of the same thing of how you made me watch Phantom Menace first. And a lot of people cannot appreciate Phantom Menace. And I am able to love Phantom Menace for what it is. So that's how I would do it.
Interesting.
How would you do it?
Well, I've rewatched all of Clone Wars several times because it's my comfort food. I'll sit there, I'll watch, like I've gone to the effort, for example, of watching all of the Star Trek episodes in order by star date, which is similar to what we're doing now, which involves interspersing several shows simultaneously.
Sam, that's really nerdy.
Yeah, no. Although that was back in the old days when someone I knew who wasn't me would have pirated all those episodes and could put them on a playlist and then you could watch them easily. Whereas nowadays you watch them on Netflix.
Yeah, for legal reasons, that's a joke.
That's someone else.
Oh, okay.
It's not me. I never did such a thing. But I don't even know if I would include it.
Wow.
It's got 2 great lightsaber battles. It's got 1 fantastic space battle.
It's got the inauguration of Snips.
It's got the inauguration of Snips.
Action Padme.
But
R2 with his rocket boots.
We see Action Padme. We see R2 with his rocket boots. It's nice to know that Ahsoka wasn't originally intended for Anakin. Anakin didn't necessarily want a Padawan, but does it fit massively in the rest of the watch through? And the answer is not terribly. If you watch all the episodes in release order, you end up seeing bits of a battle here, bits of a battle there, callbacks to this. As I was putting together the chronological list for what we're watching, I'm seeing a lot of things that are interesting in their order. And it's cool to see that this is an important part, particularly of the Battle of Christophsis, because I didn't necessarily think that was a hugely important part of what was going on. And if you just watch the Clone Wars TV series, you won't think it's a huge battle.
It just seemed like yet another battle.
There's Admiral Trench, and then there's some other cool stuff. But when you watch it as the part of this movie that's that arc, you're like, oh, and that's when Ahsoka gets introduced.
I would say that I would include it, and it may be purely because this movie shows so many different ways to be a woman in Star Wars.
Ooh, I like that.
It shows you how to be a young female Padawan on a light side user. It shows you how to be a dark side user. It shows you how to be a completely non-Force user who's still able to create change in the galaxy.
And who has great trigger discipline with her concealed blaster.
Holy moly.
She shoots him in the chest and shoots him in the head to take him out before getting taken out. So
remind me not to get on Padme's bad side ever.
She's a combat monster given half the chance, and she's proven it, which is such a funky thing. You don't think of senators so much as that. This also introduces Zero, and later on when we meet Zero, he's in jail. And so this explains, she's given a real funky face, folks. She's not a fan of Zero.
I am offended by Zero's mere existence.
I feel like that is because you originate from the South.
I am Southern, and being gay in the South is already so fraught that Zero's gay Southern queen thing is deeply offensive to me.
I stand by that. I think it's a parody of that, because you have other Southern over-the-top figures throughout history with crazy camp voices like that, and making them into a gangster leader kind of takes the wind out of the sails of the idea. It makes him seem like considerably less of a threat than he actually is. But compare Zero the Hutt versus Jabba the Hutt. Zero the Hutt is on Coruscant, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
That's the difference between being the mob boss in New York City and being the mob boss in Kansas City. There's a difference, and Tatooine is hugely important, but it is in the sticks, and Coruscant's a big deal.
There is a difference. I guess in 2008, we hadn't yet gotten to the level of critical discourse that you don't have to queer code all of your villains. And so I'm going to give it a pass, but I would really like to see better in the future.
Yeah, that does. I don't know when exactly we crossed that line. I feel like once Javier Bardem in, was it Skyfall? Yeah, and you're like, okay, that's intriguing enough. But now we've kind of gotten that out of our system.
Yeah, let's move on from queer coding our villains.
Yeah, but just the idea of slug creatures having gender is no front to me. I am for aliens having funky alien genders, and I don't like that Jabba is a he. I like that Jabba is a Jabba.
Yeah.
I want Jabba
just
to
an
be
amorphous, genderless blob.
Yes. Eggs, spawn, whatever. He just puts them wherever there's fluid, and that's why he stays on Tatooine, because he's trying to reduce his dowries he has to pay or something. I like aliens to be real alien, and we've talked about this in the past. Star Wars has a good assortment of aliens.
That's a hot take. I love it.
Yeah, I like seeing Jabba. I don't know if we ever see Jabba in animated works again. If we do, it'll be for just a moment.
Wow.
Yeah.
They did a nice job with his animation.
They did, and the
tail was very expressive for both him and for Zero.
Yeah, and then the little Stinky. I know you didn't like him. I thought he was cute.
No, I thought Stinky was the perfect comedic relief because he doesn't talk. He was infinitely better than C-3PO because, like, he can be in the battle scene making funny faces or funny noises and he doesn't talk. And so it doesn't take the wind out of the sail for the comedic value. It really holds up over time.
Also, there's a good element of show don't tell with they call him Stinky. And that's the thing you can't get across in this media. And so Ahsoka always, and Anakin always being like, he's real stinky and I don't like him very much because he's, loud and stinky. That tells you a lot about what's going on off scene and what's going on in their world that we don't have.
It does. And I appreciate that every main character had to take a turn carrying him. Ahsoka has to carry him. Anakin has to stick him in the backpack. And R2 eventually has to kind of trundle him up into the crappy ship. So they all had to take a turn babysitting, and that was delightful.
Yeah. So it's a weird one. I've watched it. I've enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more, as you said, with a
critical lens.
Yeah, with a really critical lens. But Anakin stays pretty much the same throughout the series. Well, this is a continuation of Anakin's character. I feel like Ventress might have even had a different voice actor. She's a little bit less moving forward. And Obi-Wan is much more lighthearted later in the war. And that is an interesting character arc to take. I don't know if that's something which is as common. It feels like if you are a warrior, especially a happy warrior, but a reluctant warrior like Obi-Wan, that you would start out happy and get darker over time. And I don't know if that jives with watching it in the actual chronological order, because he is dark in this movie.
Yeah. I appreciated this movie quite a bit. I'm not going to be coming back to it anytime soon. It's not a restful watch for me.
Ooh, that's a good way to put it. But, if you love Star Wars as much as we do, you got to watch it just for a few things. And
there are many bays to be celebrated.
Ooh, let's do it.
It's that time.
It's that time.
It's time for Baywatch. I had such a hard time picking a bae in this movie. There are so many folks who deserve to be celebrated. I would say Pad Bae deserves to be celebrated for literally saving the day.
Being action Padme, yes.
R2 is incredible, as always.
He gets a kill.
He's
got his little antenna that he poops up after that and is like, presuming posting a kill count on the galactic internet. He's like, R2-1, noob 0.
R2 is a god. C-3PO has a role to play in saving the day. He rescues Padme. But the bae of the second half of the Clone Wars movie, it's going to be Ahsoka.
Wasn't she your bae in the first half?
She was my bae in the first half, and that was even before she heroically takes down 3 of the scariest droids I've ever seen to bring little baby Jabba unscathed back to his dad. That moment when she says, I really didn't think being a Padawan was going to be this hard. Holy moly. If that's not my experience of adulting. I mean, Ahsoka made me feel so seen. And she was a bamf and she saved the day.
She did. And, that's after spending a day at least walking across the Dune Sea.
It is.
Which is like deep Jedi reserves of energy.
Yeah.
And yeah, she had also gotten into a tussle with Ahsoka or Ventress earlier that day, which is tough because Ventress is no pushover.
Yeah. Ahsoka just gave me so many feels, and Ahsoka gave me so much to celebrate in this movie. There's no question. I mean, there's plenty of honorary baes, but it's got to be Ahsoka.
Oh, no, that's fair. If you didn't choose her, I would have. So
okay, then who did you choose?
I'm choosing my boy Rex.
Aww.
I love from episode 1 or 2. I think episode 2 of our podcast, when we watched The Phantom Menace, Captain Tycho. I love someone who shows up to work and does their job.
Oh.
I love Rex because he's sitting there, he's surrounded by dying clones the entire movie.
Yeah, trigger warning, clone death.
Yeah, there's a fair bit of rather explicit clone death. He, when he's captured, like Ventress walks in with droids and they're all reporting, and he's lying there in a pile in the corner. And what does he do? He
Takes
starts
his
blasting.
head up and starts blasting.
Yeah, and then he gets mind wiped. He gets mind tricked by Ventress, and he says, "Anakin, you need to come to the courtyard." And that's what Ventress told him to do. But Anakin immediately twigs onto the fact that Rex has been mind controlled by Ventress, because Rex would never say Anakin. Rex never says Anakin's first name. Mm-hmm. Also, in all of the battle scenes, he's just like, all right, well, we're in cover, but this big guy's going to come and blow up our cover, so I'm going to dive underneath him or shoot a vulture droid with a rifle until it explodes. He is a one-man wrecking machine. He is Rex. He is great. And although we see Rex earlier in Cat and Mouse, Hidden Enemy, and we see him in a lot of the episodes moving forward, he represents, I think, the good of Anakin's war effort. Because as we spoke about, Anakin led like the 501st, which is this insane, like, point it at something and it will be destroyed problem solving unit. And Rex lives through the whole war, spoiler alert, and is this a clone who survives the whole war, and a clone who works with Anakin in these extremely high risk, high reward situations. And this is the first one. And he does it with aplomb, and he does it with style, and he does it with his 2 blasters.
He does.
He's got an element of bravery to him that I find really endearing. And out of all of the clones, I feel like he is the exemplar. And we don't see, I think we see more of him in the first half, but his moments of shining were in the second half of this movie.
He definitely had his moments in the sun, and they were impressive.
Yeah. So, Ahsoka, very strong contender. R2, he tried real hard at the second half, but he's like 1 for 3 for heroic moments.
You know what?
So,
A for effort, R2. You can do no wrong in my eyes. He's my baby.
Yeah. So that's really the stable of bays. We're going to have to start calling out new characters now.
Oh my gosh, I know. Well, Dave Filoni, give me more female characters to celebrate and I'll make him my bae. It's easy as that.
Well, that's a little bit of Star Wars news for those of you who are listening near release date, is that Rangers of the New Republic was sort of canceled.
Oh.
Because it was starring Cara Dune. And she was no longer part of the Disneyverse. But Rangers of the New Republic, as of this morning, might be restarted. And if that's the case, I can think of 3 solid female leads who would be in the correct time period to do that kind of thing.
Cool.
And I think a female-fronted show would be really cool. We know that there's an Ahsoka show coming out, and I believe the Acolyte show, which is a prequel to everything by about 200 years, is also going to be female-fronted. But those would be... It's, as you spoke right now, it's a really interesting opportunity to shine, particularly with the athletic kinematics, as you said with Ventress fighting.
Mm-hmm. It is so exciting to see different kinds of people in battle together. So I think it would be a real missed opportunity if they didn't put female leads in the front, especially because there's plenty of people who are Star Wars fans who are interested in that content.
Absolutely. And it just shows that, not everything needs to be the way George Lucas envisioned it, with a bunch of stormtroopers and one woman in a metal bikini. So
there you go. It is the true test. Can Star Wars flex over time to continue to stay delightful and relevant to a changing audience?
Yeah.
That's it for this Tuesday, folks. As always, you can find us on social media at Growing Up Skywalker. If you like the show, please leave us a review on your podcast app, Or send it to your best clone friend who just really deserves a break every once in a while.
Or your Padawan who's having a tough day.
Oh, yeah.
If you'd like to get access to other fun goodies, including having your name read on the show, you can find us on Patreon, and we really appreciate that. It really helps.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, if you have any questions, please send a listener holocron to growingupskywalker@gmail.com. We promise we read every single one. Tune in next Tuesday for Clone Cadets, which is Season 3, Episode 1, and Supply Lines, which is Season 3, Episode 3.
Can't wait.
I'm a huge fan of these next episodes. So, yes, join us, please.
Excellent. All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye.